If there's one thing I hope you get from my videos, it's not the importance of comics, appreciating the complexity of the X-Men, or even basic knowledge of them. No. It's that giant robots are awesome. Gundam, Zone of the Enders, Getter Robo, all near and dear to my heart. Though I wish I could sit here today and talk about them, I think a video about the new Hathaway movie would get a collective of 7 views, 3 of which would be me, myself, and I. Though you might ask, why bring all of this up? Well, you know what else has giant robots? The X-Men. And let's be honest, you guys really like them, so what would be better to talk about today? The Sentinels are one of the most prominent and dangerous foes the X-Men have ever dealt with. I mean, you remember Genosha. You don't have an entire event titled the Genosha Massacre if you're not at least pretty decent at putting down mutants. And you have to be pretty strong to do that when a lot of them are hormonal carpet bombs waiting to go off. So while I go cash in this check from today's sponsor, Orcus, let's talk about the X-Men's greatest foe, the Sentinels. The Sentinels would make their first appearance in X-Men 14, created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. Following the Juggernaut's assault on Charles Xavier, would go on a televised debate with outspoken mutant critic and anthropologist Bolivar Trask, who believed that mutants were a threat to humankind and would replace them, which needed to be dealt with as efficiently as possible. Now, during this debate on a live broadcast, I kid you not, pulls out a giant robot on the middle of the stage, which I'm sorry, I find that absolutely hilarious. Imagine during a real-life debate, one of the guys go, "Oh, good counterpoint, sir, but have you ever considered I made a robot army made to kill you and your entire species?" And fully believed this would make him look like the most sensible person in the room. The Sentinels would quickly turn around and start attacking at random, denouncing humanity and that the Sentinels are the superior beings. Bravo, Trask. Now, while similar to a standard Sentinel, there are stark differences that separate them, starting with their colors. Lacking that standard purple color palette we know them for, they offer the more bold red and blue with the touches of yellow, though they would resemble their standard appearance in the covers of these issues, so maybe they only look like this way due to printing costs of certain colors, and they were intended to look purple, but that's mainly a theory on my end, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, as we have similar cases in the past. As well, their size isn't this giant imposing figure that most people know them for, rather they're around 7 feet tall, a far cry what we know them for. In terms of defense, they had a metallic shell that protects them from head-on assaults from even the X-Men. Due to their nature of being a robot, Sentinels are impervious to mental attacks. They also have rocket-propelled boots that allow them to fly multiple miles without stopping and the speed comparable to a fighter jet. They have strength comparable to other heroes, being able to lift heavy objects and rays that can break down reinforced walls with relative ease. Even strong enough to defeat the X-Men and capture them, leading to Trask, a human, not a mutant mind you, come in and blow himself up in the base the Sentinels were stationed at, giving up his life to even save them and the rest of humanity. Sure, he might have made the Sentinels, but look, they were in beta, and they've probably killed less than your average data center or a ChatGPT prognosis. And we give that a shit ton of money, so hey, there's a bright side, I think. Now, there are 2 types of Mark 1s, your standard grunts who, while capable of operating machinery, were quite limited in their thought process outside of directly being controlled by Trask, or the second type, the Master Mold, basically the queen bee of the Sentinels, as it had the ability to command the grunt units and also responsible for the creation of more Sentinels, a less of the on-the-field unit and more of a giant supercomputer working from afar. That doesn't mean it can't square up in a fight if it had to, but it just prefers to be as far away as possible, having the chaff units do the dirty work for it. But after their first appearance and fight, the Sentinel project would soon fall into obscurity on account of the guy behind it, dying. Though what did you know? Giant racist robots could be a family business, as soon after Bolivar's death, his son, Larry, would soon reign over and start the Mark II program. Now by Mark II, the Sentinels began to resemble the one most people know them for. They have their iconic purple and pink color scheme, and their height towers everyone on the ground immensely more compared to the previous edition. By all intents and purposes, these are the Sentinels that everyone knows and loves. Love might be a strong word. Now, considering the fact that the Mark I went full Terminator mode and wanted all of humanity to kneel to them and less than 5 seconds, mind you, most would question the notion of not only continuing this program, but giving them more firepower. Well, don't you worry, Larry would put it best. It was merely those mutants who made it seem that way. Yep. This is somehow the X-Men's fault. In terms of actual upgrades, it's really hard to say that Larry improved on much. They hit just as hard, they have similar specs, and they're just as fast. They're still able to take on the X-Men head on and take them down. Granted, this is a team of X-Men whose second biggest enemy after the Brotherhood is puberty, so taking down a bunch of superpowered kids isn't the own you think it is, but a 16-year-old can just as easily outsmart them as shown by Cyclops, telling them Mark II that if they want to protect humans from mutants, well, by that logic, just fighting the X-Men won't do. Now you see, if mutations come from radiation, you might as well go to the source of the radiation, the sun, and they all flew into the sun. The fact that the Sentinels program managed to get past the second phase is genuinely astonishing, because what the hell? Okay, I promise we'll get to the actual glazing soon. It's just really hard to actually do that when the first couple of phases of Sentinels might be the worst money sink of all time, which doesn't help my case when the very next phase was a downgrade from the previous models. As soon after the death of Bolivar and Larry Trask, the plans for the Sentinels would fall into the hands of the United States, would employ Dr. Stephen Lang, who was more happy to take a stab at the whole annihilate all mutants idea. Now, due to the fact that Dr. Lane was working with incomplete notes on account of the first project exploding and the second flying directly into the sun, there wasn't much to go off of. But he did make do, and the results would be comparable to previous incarnations. As well, we would actually have an interesting development with the Sentinels, as for the first time, they were able to disguise themselves, as a handful of them took up the appearance of the original X-Men and was so good at mimicking the others, they even took after their powers. It did mean that while they lost access to their standard Sentinel equipment in exchange for their disguises, they were also the basis and would lead to what would come next, the Prime Sentinels. But first, do you like my videos? Well, maybe consider liking, subscribing, and even commenting what I should cover next, as I do try reading every single one of them, and I just reactivated my Twitter account, so maybe try following there, as I try to post there more often. Thanks for the support. Let's get back to the video. Now, I'm going to jump ahead to the 90s because at that point, you can kind of pick up what's happening. A new batch of Sentinels is printed. Outside of a few changes, they're not that different. They either turn on their creator or are defeated before that happens. Insert speech about how one state can lead to their own destruction, you get the point. Now, when it gets interesting is with the introduction of the Prime Sentinels. The Prime Sentinels are introduced after the villain Bastion infiltrates the United States government and created a rogue faction within it. The aptly named Operation Zero Tolerance would usher in the new era of Sentinels with the goal of yet again destroying all mutants, though through more sinister means. No, not you. Go shoot. I talked about you enough. You were only in 97. Go away. While normally when you hear the name Sentinel, you think of a giant robot flying through the sky, armed head to toe, and with an intimidating presence. The Prime Sentinels were a lot smaller, as they weren't just completely autonomous robots. No. The Prime Sentinels were a virus. A virus that infected regular people, typically through innocuous means. A free vacation, slip through medicine, or even a classic kidnapping. People without their knowledge were made into sleeper agents, patiently waiting of a mutant in proximity, and as if a switch flipped in their head, would attack said mutant relentlessly. Neighbors, co-workers, and even family members weren't safe. Anyone could be infected by the Prime Sentinels. I think the reason why this is all more terrifying is the underlining paranoia it would cause. With previous incarnations of Sentinels, at least you knew when the giant murderous robot was outside your house. It's kind of hard to miss something so big. While with Prime Sentinels, there was no way of knowing who was infected. You could be walking by someone on the street and before you knew it, have someone open fire on you. Their most popular incarnation would be definitely X-Men 97, and as you can see, they're absolutely horrifying to go up against. A mob of cybernetic zombies rushing at you, wanting nothing more to rip you limb for limb. Though in the comics, the Prime Sentinels were more typical. Instead of being mindless zombies, they were more akin to pint-sized Sentinels having the same abilities. Though speaking of 97, that leads me to Now, the Mark I weren't the only Sentinels that Boulevard Trask created, though short-lived, enough time passed for an offshoot to be developed in the deep jungles of the Amazons. Unlike the Mark Is, the Wild Sentinels Master Mold made models designed to scavenge and constantly adapt and change within their environment. No longer humanoid, the Wild Sentinels were more akin to giant insectoids. During the E for Extinction storyline, Cassandra Nova reached out to one of Trask's descendants, a mild-mannered dentist who had no clue what his family members were getting up to, which I'm sorry must be terrible to go through. Your filling appointment was cancelled because your dentist was kidnapped to the Amazon because his uncle was an anti-mutant robotist. Genosha would soon be steamrolled by these Wild Sentinels. Skyscrapers would collapse, streets torn asunder, and the millions would fall victim to these beasts. 16 million in total to be precise. Now, despite an impressive showing, the Wild Sentinels would make few appearances. Their next appearance would be in Astonishing X-Men by Joss Whedon and John Cassaday, where the villain Danger sends a Wild Sentinel towards Charles Xavier. Now, due to Danger's influence, the once mindless drone, lacking the advanced tactical intelligence compared to a standard unit, has been given consciousness, but Kitty Pryde managed to crack into his mind and unlock the memory of the Genosha massacre. The Wild Sentinel was so disgusted with itself, the concept of 16 million deaths, his minds wouldn't be able to comprehend the weight, but for the Wild Sentinel, he could. It would only return to not harm mutants, but to protect them. When the Krun shot their killing bullet and feared that the mutant Colossus would one day come and destroy their planet, when it seemed everything was lost, the Wild Sentinel makes a conscious choice to ram itself into it. Its final moments were not of fear, but hope. Hope that despite all the horrible crimes committed, it can at least die in atonement for those thoughtless sins. Tragically, the bullet cuts through the Sentinel with ease. Sorry, I need a minute. I just wanted to talk about robots, man. Now, I kinda lied to you. I didn't really want to talk about Sentinels today. Well, okay, I did, but really, I think a better title for this video would be Nimrod is the most terrifying guy I have laid my eyes on, featured a brief history on the Sentinels, because oh my god, to say that he is deadly is an understatement. To give you an idea, have you ever played a fighting game, and no matter what you do, your opponent has the right answer to anything you throw out? That's what anyone who's unlucky enough to fight against Nimrod. I didn't even take this paycheck because it was a lot of money. It was like 20 bucks. It was because Nimrod was outside my door delivering it. Heralding from Earth 811, the same Earth as Rachel Summers and the Earth from Days of Future Past, a bad future for the X-Men, the United States would reactivate the Sentinel program and once and for all wipe out the mutant menace. The Sentinels thought the best course of action was to, of course, to take over the entire country. Mutants are surprisingly on the brink of extinction, forced into slavery to serve the Sentinels, marked with the letter M. Yeah, it was pretty bleak. The remaining X-Men of Earth 811 was able to warn the current day X-Men through the powers of telepathy and were able to prevent the future from happening. Basically, think of the Android saga, but future Trunks was instead a butch lesbian with the powers of God, which I'm not complaining. If the Sentinels were like the androids in the Cell saga, being the cause of the bad future, Nimrod would be their equivalent to Cell from Dragon Ball, both their logical endpoints. Something, if it were to ever come to fruition, would be devastating. The only silver lining would be the world was already lost to the Sentinels, so the creation of Nimrod would only make things slightly worse. It took both the X-Men and the Hellfire Club to team up to actually take him down, though it was no easy feat. What makes Nimrod unique from previous Sentinels is that he is a perfect counter to every mutant, as he's not able to just detect them, but also analyze them, allowing him to create specific countermeasures. Because of his mastery of his own molecular structure, he was able to completely regenerate and teleport, and that's even if you're able to get close enough to get a hit in, let alone leave a dent. Wow, this guy really is Cell. Thankfully, this is only a relic of a future long gone and avoided. If Nimrod was allowed to be created in the present, it would mean the end of during the Krakoa era, or how I so eloquently put it in my last video, Krakow. But what was revealed is that Moira was not just a mutant ally, rather she was a mutant herself, though it took an entire lifetime to realize that, as after living a long fulfilled normal life, she drew her last breath. her vision goes from a blur to pitch black, and then she wakes up. Not as an elderly woman, but rather a newborn. Stranger yet, she maintained all her memories from her previous life. She's still the same person, and time hasn't passed. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Time was reset. Her mutation abilities can only be triggered upon death, and every time she did, her mutation would cause the world to reset. Both intrigued and horrified by this concept, Moira would spend the next few lifetimes studying her mutations and mutants in general. Some would be quite short, as her second life, her plane crashed while trying to meet Xavier for the first time, to well over 1,000 years. But during her first handful of lives, she made a horrific realization: a world of Sentinel dominance, or worse yet, Nimrod was not a question of if, rather when. You see, in multiple of Moira's life cycles, she saw firsthand that the Sentinels would inevitably win, overcome the X-Men, and take over the world. Even fighting side by side with Apocalypse, they would be overpowered and would soon fall. Worse yet, by fighting the Sentinels, they weren't obstructing their evolution, they were actually expediting it. Now, Nimrod wasn't just regulated to a bad future, something that was only a product of an already Sentinel-dominated world. But now, after recontextualizing every single fight with the Sentinels, they weren't stopping this future from happening, they were bringing it to the present as the dawn of Nimrod would draw closer and closer. Now, obviously, like any rational person, Moira and the rest of Krakoa collectively shat themselves at the mere thought of Nimrod was a possibility and made it their personal mission to stop any and all innovation in AI. You could say a lot of things about Krakoa, but hey, at least they didn't have AI slop. Now, I bring all of this up because of one person, Karima, who was one of the many victims from Operation Zero Tolerance, where she was kidnapped and forced to be Omega Sentinel, another mutant hunting sleeper agent, though she would be rehabilitated to fight against her Prime Sentinel programming and would become an ally to the X-Men, but she was never able to tap into her full Sentinel abilities as her Omega Sentinel form was overwritten, giving back a majority of her humanity. That would change as when the AI god Enigma from the far future sent a copy of her consciousness directly into Karima, who fully assimilated into Omega Sentinel, killing her and replacing her with this far future version of herself. Why did he do this? Because this would essentially send all the information on how to create the mother mold in Nimrod after centuries of advancements to the present, with Karima's body taken over, and with this new directive would go on to found the organization Orcus, and after manipulating Mystique and Destiny to shoot Moira with a depowering gun, made it so the timeline where the knowledge of Nimrod now locked in only meant one thing: Nimrod was not in the future. He is in the present, and we see everything come together in the Hellfire Gala. What was seemingly a beautiful celebration of mutant culture, Krakoa survived another year and was seemingly on the verge of prosperity. If it could survive everything that came before, the future was guaranteed. A new day, and a new team was on the horizon. A first for many and a new day for Krakoa, though fate had different plans. Oh, this might be one of the most harrowing scenes in all of the X-Men's history. Now, typically when a Sentinel shows up, as long as you aren't just introduced, it's pretty safe to say that you'll get out with a couple of scratches, while the random no-name mutant takes a blow to make them look all the more scary. But when Nimrod makes his appearance, he crushes Jubilee's skull with ease, tears through 4 of the newly appointed X-Men, and when the Juggernaut tries to stop him, killed him instantly, leaving his head nothing but a stump, and he would drag Juggernaut's lifeless body. Iceman, who's an Omega level mutant, tried to stand up to Nimrod, giving it his all, but in the span of a single page, Nimrod analyzed his mutation, discovered his weakness, created it, and shot him with it, which was a cellular napalm that would overpower Bobby's Sub-Zero powers, melting him from the inside out. From just a singular encounter, Xavier would surrender immediately, mind-controlling all of the remaining inhabitants on Krakoa to get them off the island, and would break down in tears, saying that it's all over and the X-Men were dead, groveling at his feet, and then would join Orcus as that was the only chance that mutants had a chance of survival in his mind. God, Xavier sucks. just as much as Nimrod is terrifying. The worst part is that this man is doing it with a smile on his face. He's making quips while he's just casually ripping and tearing the X-Men. I think why this works so well is that it almost feels wrong. That something was taken away from not just us within the story, but also outside of it. That we saw the glimpse of a bright future that was ripped right out of our hands from nowhere. Where we had the start of so many story arcs, Miss Marvel, and a whole new X-Men team. It really felt like a horrific future coming to clash with the present day, and there was nothing that could be done about it. And it's just so traumatizing to see unfold. It took the entirety of the remaining mutants and X-Men to actually defeat Nimrod, leading to one of my favorite Scott and Storm moments. Any last words? She won't let you kill me. This is more prattle about your dead wife. No, allow me to introduce you to Storm. A billion calculations, only to end up being wrong about the last X-Men standing. It's the most humanity Nimrod could ever achieve. Man, we really had something here. But by and large, those have been the Sentinels. They're pretty neat, aren't they? Going from stumbling robots, the sleeper ancients, and the scariest dude you've ever seen. Yeah, they might be evil robots, but come on, dude. They're cool evil robots. Once again, thanks for watching, and if you liked the video, like it, and maybe subscribe, share it, and leave a comment. Thanks for watching.